Hi, in this video I want to share a few perspectives I have from watching the film, the great film by Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, one of the greatest films of all time, um, without a doubt, uh, one of the most controversial films of all time, based on the life of newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. So here are just a few perspectives that I have from the film. First perspective is psychological. Things that happen to us in childhood can follow us into our adult lives. Citizen Kane is a story about a man who learns that money can buy you everything except love. This film is also about the relationships we have with our parents and how those relationships can affect every relationship we have throughout our lives. Kane learns that money may be able to buy you a newspaper, but it can't necessarily buy you love. And this is why you see people who buy stuff all the time that they have no need for. This is why you have compulsive gamblers, or people who get addicted to drugs, or people who get addicted to sex, or even people who jump in and out of relationships. In all of these situations, there is a void that needs to be filled, but when the remedy can't be found or determined, that remedy is substituted for something that gives pleasure, because pleasure makes you forget about pain. This is why the rate of alcoholism is higher among the unemployed than those that are employed, or why unhappy women eat more, or how some people become addicted to sex. Addicts use sexual activity to seek pleasure, avoid unpleasant feelings, or respond to outside stressors such as work difficulties or interpersonal problems. This is not unlike how an alcoholic uses alcohol. In both instances, any reward gained from the experience soon gives way to guilt, remorse, and promises to change. In Citizen Kane, we see first a boy separated from his parents. Two, we see a man who becomes addicted to buying priceless works of art, yet keeping that art stored in cases. And three, we see a man jumping in and out of relationships that in the end leave him unsatisfied and bitter. This is because Kane is trying to fill a void created when his mother decided that wealth was more important than love in his upbringing. It's ironic but no accident that Kane's custodian is a banker, someone who can provide for him the best schools and material upbringing, everything except love. His parents, on the other hand, are poor, or were poor before discovering a gold mine on their property, and uneducated. Yet Kane seems very happy with them playing on his sled in the very beginning of the film. This is the whole point of Kane's story, that he was happy when he was with his parents, even though they were poor. In the opening shot, we see Xanadu, the estate of Charles Foster Kane, through the links of a fence. Then we see his mansion high on its hill through the bars of a gate. The mansion is dark, lonely, and ominous, but there is a single light on the mansion. But it slowly dims, and in that room, in that mansion, Charles Foster Kane is lying on a bed, and something falls from his hand and shatters on the floor. The scene after this one shows a newsreel of Kane's spectacular life and achievements. The producer of this newsreel sends a reporter out to find Rosebud, which was Kane's last word. The reporter's journey begins at the memorial of Walter Parks Thatcher, the banker who raised Charles Foster Kane. Thatcher kept a memoir, and Kane's childhood is told in a flashback in the following clip. All of the clips are flashbacks from people who knew him. Some of the flashbacks aren't reliable. For example, the reporter interviews Susan Alexander in her nightclub. She is drunk as she tells her version of Kane's story. Jedediah, a friend who betrayed Kane, is in a nursing home, and his memory is failing him somewhat as he tells his version of Kane's story. There's a clip at the very beginning where we see Kane in a boarding home, and he's surrounded by snow, and he's out playing on his sled. Meanwhile, inside the home, Mrs. Kane and Mr. Kane are arguing because Mrs. Kane, has inherited a gold mine on the property, and she is signing papers to turn Kane over to Mr. Thatcher, whose bank is holding the trust that Charles would inherit on his 25th birthday. Mrs. Thatcher wants the bank to be their son's guardian and believes that their son will be better educated in the bank's care. And Mrs. Kane is at the table with her husband signing the paperwork. Mr. Thatcher is angry about it. But in the background, you see Kane playing on his sled out in the snow, and he's framed by a window. And I believe that this image says that Kane at this point is happy. But Mrs. Thatcher mentions the $50,000 a year allowance that the boy is going to get, and then a $50 allowance that they're going to get from the fund. And Mr. Kane calms down, after the money is mentioned that they're going to get from this fund that this bank is going to hold in trust for their son. So after signing the boy over to the banker, Miss Kane calls Kane in, and Mr. Thatcher, her husband, takes the boy, and then you see the abandoned sled is covered up in snow. Now, this is where the sadness in the film starts. Mrs. Kane decides to have her son raised in a materialistic environment that is insensitive to his emotional needs. Kane's viewpoint of the world in relation to himself is, if I give you something, you must love me. But throughout his public and private life, he is incapable of giving love because he was raised by a banker who only provided for his material needs. And this upbringing and his mother's reasoning for giving him up in the first place conditions him to think that he can be loved by returning something other than love. This is a fantastic scene. This first scene in this film is just amazing, because right away it already establishes the paradox of Charles as a small boy who is happy and yet very poor. His parents, particularly his father, are not college educated, but the boy seems happy and content anyway. His happiness is interrupted and taken away from him by Thatcher, the banker, who his mother believes will provide the proper education for him also. Right away, there is a trade-off of his childhood and happiness for wealth that he searches for throughout the film. This scene also sheds light on his motivations later as an adult as to why his newspaper stands up for people who are poor. His father in this scene has no say-so over his son being turned over to the bank, and Kane's newspaper is the voice for those who remind him of his father. And let me see if I have any more perspectives that I'd like to share about this film. I mean, this film has been discussed in so many quarters that it's really not much more that anyone can add, can really offer, other than their own subjective interpretation of the film, which is what I got. And I think that everybody's interpretation is going to be filtered through their experiences, their life experiences, their DNA. No two people are going to see the same thing the same way. And this film, even though a lot of my perspectives have already been offered by others, there's always going to be something that's personal in it that is going to be based upon my experiences. And that's what I'm trying to get across here, is that, this film is like any other work of art. It's subjective, and this was one of the uh, best films that I've ever seen. The first time I saw it, I admit that I saw it because people said that it was a great film, and that's always going to um, that's always going to get me to at least take a look at it to see what all the talk is about, because I don't think that a movie can be around for decades, for generations, and not resonate. I mean, there has to be something about it for subsequent generations to be able to connect with and to be able to identify with. So when I first saw this film, I was blown away. I saw a lot of parallels to my own upbringing, to my own childhood. My parents never never had a gold mine or anything like that. But as far as having some things in my life that I wish that I could go back and I could relive, because once you lose that childhood, you never get it back. And if you have been in a situation where you haven't had a a really good relationship with someone in your family, then on a subconscious level, you're going to be looking for that relationship through other relationships in your life. It could be with people, it could be with things, But this is a great film, and I'm going to make another video about this film, offering more perspectives of it. I just want to kind of put something together to kind of pay homage to a great film. I don't think that films like this, I think that films like this need to be preserved, and I think that films like this need to be talked about so that they can so they can remain alive, because these films are truly great. They don't need all of these special effects. This film wasn't even in color. There was absolutely nothing to distract you from the power. There was absolutely nothing to augment the power that this story contained. So that's it. I would appreciate it if you would leave a comment or give me a like. There is a link in the description that you can take to my blog, where you can read more film-related commentary, such as the video that I produced here. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.